that. And thank you all for inviting me here and giving me the opportunity to speak about my favorite subject. And I wanted to start out by by finding out more about you guys. How many of you are horse lovers? Okay. Oh, gosh. Look at us all. Keep your hands up. Yeah. And how many of you have had horses? Quite a few. How many still have horses? Fewer, but still a few. Good, good. Well, you're going to relate to a lot of this, so that's nice, and we'll probably have some good questions later. Um, so, why did I call it equisatori? A satori is an aha moment. It's can be a moment of enlightenment. It could be an insight or something. So, after years of working with people and horses together, I started noticing that they were having these little aha light bulbs going off. And so I started calling them equisatories. That's how I came up with that name. So you're, let's see, I started the Equisatory Center many years ago when this was our mission, is to raise global awareness and understanding of the horse-human connection and its beneficial impact on health, consciousness, and personal development, while engaging with horses in a manner that promotes mindful equine care and training techniques. So I wanted to tell you what brought you here today. I'm just curious, you don't all have to answer, but a lot of you are horse people, and those of you who aren't, maybe what brought you here was curiosity about these animals, or you've heard about equine assisted learning or equine assisted therapy, and I'll touch lightly on those, but I mostly want to stay focused on what horses, how they actually are as animals, as sentient beings, and how that benefits us. So, who's heard of equine assisted therapy? Oh, quite a few, but some of you not. So, equine assisted therapy has started in the last 30 years, and it's when you bring a therapist together with people and horses to learn skills or insightful benefits to the therapist and the horse and the client. Horses in that setting, there's a diagnosis, and you have to have a licensed therapist there. And then we've all heard of hippotherapy, where for years hundreds of years, they've been actually working with horses to help people with physical disabilities, and that's still alive and well, and we're doing a lot with that. Where I'm at is in the equine assisted learning category. So this is experiential learning, but it's really anybody can go do this. It's no diagnosis or anything that's necessary for that. So we all know that horses have helped us evolve over the millennia. They've empowered humans, and they continue to empower us today by demonstrating how interconnected we are and revealing the creative power of presence, awareness, and intention in relationships. So this picture of these horses was discovered on the walls of one of the oldest caves ever discovered in France. Since they discovered this one, they've actually found another one that's even older, but the walls were covered with horses and other animals. But this picture in particular struck me because it shows that they had a real relationship with these animals. There's a baby horse down here. There's a little young horse, and then there's like a teenage horse, and looking on up to adult. That implies that they really had a real ongoing relationship with them. Now, we don't know, maybe they were just eating them, but probably not. In order to get close to one, you have to have certain energetic going on in you, otherwise they'll stay away. So they probably figured that out, even if they were eating them. So, today, in today's modern world with all our technology, we've created a lot of overstimulation, haven't we? I mean, geez, are we in our heads or what? It's just, and the stress diseases and stress responses and all that going on is, we all are aware of this. And I believe that part of this has happened, none of us want to give up the technology, but what's happened is that we've really lost qualities inside of ourselves, parts of ourselves that we used to touch into when we worked with nature and animals. And so what I discovered for myself was in the process of learning to connect with horses, they helped me reconnect to these dormant abilities and other ways of knowing, not just my usual hearing and sight and whatnot. And this we've been able to repeat over and over and over again with people for the past 20, 25 years working with this kind of work with horses. It's pretty cool. So where did it all start? So for me, I was born a little horsey person into a non-horsey family. And I can remember being 3 and 4 years old. I have vivid memories of me with a dish rag tucked in my pants, and I was crawling around on the floor pretending I was a horse. And my parents were intellectuals and, engineer and teacher, my mom, and they didn't pay any attention to this. And I never was given little horses to play with or told, encouragement in that area. It wasn't till I was about 10 years old that we went on a vacation, and our family friends in Colorado had an old horse in the mountains that was all lonely and out there by herself, and they needed to rehome that horse. She just wasn't going to survive many winters. So he asked my father if he could gift me that horse. So I got my first horse at 10. Now here's the deal though. I got no saddle and no bridle, no lessons, and no supervision. And so I was, I actually am grateful for my parents for being those kind of parents back in those days, because I don't know. I think about it now. I think, Mom, what were you thinking? When I'm out on my bike. So it worked out well for me though, because that being left alone with that horse at 10 years old and being a kind of cautious kid, I wasn't one of these brave girls that jumped in the river and went. I just was watching and observing. But what that did, I believe, is it put a seed inside of me of what it felt like to be in the field with horse, what horse felt like. And of course, I was totally in love with how they smelled. If you smell one, and they all smell different right here between their nose. So if you smell a horse here, each one of them's different. It's so cool. They smell great. Anyway, flip ahead. No, so after that, I did get involved in traditional horse everything. I had the United States Top 10 Western Pleasure Mare. I had the Canadian Reserve National Champion. I went on and I found dressage at 19 and never looked back, and really loved that I could dig into how to create a relationship with a horse that benefited the horse while setting them free with energy, motion. And I showed and I, all that stuff. And then at 25, I got married. Unfortunately, it was a practice marriage, but I did get married. My husband to be gave me this horse, Diora. She was 2 years old, and he thought she was beautiful. She is beautiful, as you can see. And I thought she was beautiful too. So he bought her from me, and we moved her up to Colorado where we were living. And then I rode her later, and she was very easy to back and train. There was nothing, she won all kinds of beauty contests. She was very glamour girl. And I never had any troubles with her until I got past the 2 basic levels in dressage. Kind of second level is what any horse can do in their training. And she was fine with that. Always loved trail riding more. But then what happened was I started feeling like she really wasn't into it. She just wasn't giving me the yes all the time for going further down that training path. And I was disappointed because I wanted to go all the way. I wanted to bring a horse from backing it to Grand Prix. And I don't know if that means anything to you guys, but it's taking a horse through all their breeding and play movements under saddle. I wanted to do this. She wasn't going to do it. So I started to realize that. And I thought, oh, okay. got to get another horse. This is how it starts. Anyway, here's where it goes weird. Here's where we get off the beaten path. Our friends call up and they say, hey, how about, we talked to this group that does channeling. And how many of you have heard of channeling? Okay, quite a few of you. So, channeling, I don't know. I didn't know what it was. This is back in the 80s. And I thought, well, okay, I like these folks. They're friends that we respected. They said, oh, it was so interesting. You should try it. It was so cool. And I thought, well, what is channeling? I don't know. I guess I could try it. Open-minded, open-hearted. So we made an appointment and we called these folks on the phone. And the first thing they said is, oh, we see that you've had many lifetimes with horses. And I'm thinking, okay, that's a starter, right? Got my attention. And you have one horse in particular that would like to give you a message. She would like you to stop the structure that you're currently doing with her. That is, the structure in your work that you do with her. Well, obviously I'm floored. How does this person on the phone know to say these things to me? What the heck is going on, right? And how is it my horse is communicating? This is kind of blowing my fuse. My little brain's going crazy. I thought, wow, okay. All right, I got the message. Now, I can't tell you anything else that happened in the rest of that talk. I don't remember anything else. The other thing I have to tell you is this horse is an English-bred Arabian horse. She comes from a long lineage of English-bred horses, and they told me that I had these lifetime of breeding Arabian horses in England. And I was like, oh, geez, okay. So the world is different than I thought. Then I get back out. I went out to the barn that night and I went out to tell her that I got the message. It's pretty clear. That's a weird way to have to get to me, but I got the message. And she put her head in my lap. She was laying down and she started moaning. Sighs of like relief. It wasn't like, oh, my tummy hurts moaning. It was like, oh, God, finally. You're so dense. So I got woken up at that we are interconnected in ways that we don't really know. I mean, how do you explain this, right? So I started listening to her. And I started watching how she interacted with me in all things. And this poem of Rumi's is just, it really sums it up, of out beyond ideas of wrongdoing and right doing. There is a field. I meet you there. And when the soul lies down in that grass, the world is too full to speak about. And I love this poem in this context because what happened is beyond words for me. It's beyond explaining. And I realized after that, when I started working with Diora, with this new way of listening, and I've coined the phrase listening with awareness, I started listening to her in a new way because of this incident with the channeling, right? Next time I'm lunging her. Lunging, for those of you who don't have horses, is when you have a halter on a horse and basically a long leash, so long that they can go around you in a walk, trot, and canter, right? So I'm lunging her. And I start realizing that when I'm really being present, and she's present with me, she's not looking around or wishing she was somewhere else, and I'm listening with this awareness, because this is a field that isn't about words, it's experiential. You can train yourself to feel this. I started noticing that she was changing her gaits before I would ask her to. She'd go around and then I'd be thinking about asking her to walk and she's walking. And then I'd go, okay, how about trot? And then she would trot. And she did this both directions, walk, trot, canter, hoe, reverse, and do it the other way, all without me using one word. And I thought, what? Okay, I'm just blowing my fuse again. What's going on? So I'm curious. So you stay curious. I'm giving you the clues here about how to tap into this ability that we all have. There's nothing special about me, and there's nothing special about that horse, except that she was willing and patient to communicate with me. Some horses just go, you know, she wanted to engage. So what's going on here? So I asked my husband to come out. Oh, then I thought, okay, it's got to be the whip. I'm probably doing something super subtle with the whip. Like that horse they trained, remember, that talked or could count numbers? He was the trick horse. So I put the whip down, and she did it without the whip. And then I thought, okay, I'm going to take the line off. I'm taking the line off her. I dropped the line. She still did it. So I called my husband out. I said, look at this. Look what's going on. And he looked and he watched and he did. And afterwards I said, well, what do you think? He goes, I thought that's what you always did. What's, and I thought, okay, well, that's not, I was pretty impressed, but anyway. So again, I'm starting to tell you how this particular horse was the gift that woke me up and showed me that there's so much more to horses than our traditional models of working with them for entertainment and sport. So this is, they help us reconnect to this place and to experience it anew. So here's the keys to this field. First of all, I started thinking, why is this happening? How is this happening? And then when it started to happen consistently, I thought, okay, what's going on here that I can, what is it? First of all, you got to be present. You have to be present. And what do our cell phones do to us every day, and our computers and our constant interruptions, right? They keep us from being present. So I realized, when I go to the barn, I put all that aside, I can be present. And now I'm here. And so when we're present, and it's also, you could put the word mindful in there. I noticed that when we get real present, and presence is a continuum, a spectrum, you can get present and then you can get more present. What happens is your awareness starts to bloom and your subtle awareness starts to come online. You become more and more aware of more and more subtle things. And I call that listening with awareness. So when that starts to happen, that makes you get a little curious. You're going, oh, that's interesting. I never noticed that bird before, that special bird, or I never noticed those butterflies, or, you start to get to listening with your awareness. There's a curiosity in that. And that becomes the foundation for connection. And these are the keys to connecting with a horse. And guess what else? People. We connect with people the same way. So now here's where, at that point, back in the 80s, I didn't know about these electromagnetic fields. This comes later. So in about 2005 and 6, we start to do some science. So now I've been playing with this for a long time, been teaching other people about how to get to this place with their horses for a long time. And now I'm able to do some research. We're going to get into that right away, but I want to mention too, what happens with intention? It directly influences this electromagnetic or this field that I'm talking about. And that's what was happening with Diora on that long lunge line. My intention was sending like a signal through this field. And she was so subtle that she could read it. But think about it, they're prey animals. They've been around for thousands and thousands of years, honing the skill of reading the field because they're basically defenseless. If an animal prey gets to them to close enough to bite them, they're going to kind of be done at that point, right? So they're really good at reading the field. And that's the field they're reading, it turns out. So I like to say that the horses bring our higher qualities into practical action. So you might be thinking, well, how does that look, right? It might be practical when you're lunging your horse or this, but how does it work? How does it look when we become present and aware and connected to the field, to this electromagnetic field, this field that connects us all? Well, what would happen for me, good example is, I would be sweeping the barn, doing up my barn chores. And then I would start thinking, usually at the end of my chores, which horse I was going to start riding for the first one. Like who am I going to work with? And I have to tell you, about 85% of the time, that horse, whichever one I was thinking of, would be at the barn with his head hanging out the stall door looking at me like, I'm here, when the chores were done, when it was time to get started. And I started to think about, wow, that's a real thing. It really happens. It's nothing special. It's just that, I don't know, it's kind of like when you think of somebody and they call you. I think we do this stuff all the time. We do this all the time. I think you think about, we've all had that experience where you're thinking of something and they come. So, horses have infinite, well, this is an ancient Sanskrit saying. It's called sankalpa, and it means that intentions have infinite organizing power, and that intent weaves the fabric of the universe. So, why is this relevant here? Except that when you're connected in presence and you have this connection, this actual connection to something, like this man is walking with this horse with no halter on it, and he had just met that horse, and he'd never had a horse before, and he didn't know anything about horses when he came. So why is this horse staying with him? It's his intention. And those of us who have horses and know horses, you get this. There's a big difference between intention and will. So intention I define that as something that comes from our heart. It's like, it's my intention to be a spokesperson for horses, right? Will, it'd be like me pushing. There's a pushingness to will. There's a gripping in it. It's a more narrowed focus. You get a sense of that? So if you go out to be with a horse and they have the option of leaving, this is the key too. You got to have the halter off and have them in a space they can leave, not a round pen, bigger space. And you go at them with a lot of will, what do? They go, no thanks. They walk away. And if you create a connection through presence and awareness and listening with awareness to them, and you create an invitation, they come. So this magic I started to see happening all the time with people and myself. And so I started to wonder, what is going on with this? What is that thing? So let me talk about these heart fields. Who here has heard of HeartMath, the HeartMath organization? A few of you. Good, but not many. So HeartMath is an organization, actually I think that's coming up in the next few slides, but there are any heart that beats is sending out it's electrical. And anytime electricity moves, there's an electromagnetic field associated with it. That's how our cell phones work. That's how Bluetooth goes and all that. It's all going through electromagnetic fields. So these fields are real, and we use them all the time. We work with them all the time. And I think that inside of those fields, I'm kind of making this up, I don't really know, but I imagine that there's different frequencies. So like radio stations, right? And you can dial into different things. Well, horses read these fields. We know this for a fact. And these are measurable. And when you go to be with horses, you can start to notice these fields, how they work with them. So look at this. Notice this man who happened to stop there to ask me a question. And look at this guy. He's waiting there patiently. Okay, hi, what do you want? I'm watching you. But guess how far away this is? This is about 40 feet, and that's consistent. Horses have an electromagnetic field space around them about 40 feet away. And if you start to notice the edge of that field and you pay attention to it, that shows them respect. They start to notice you. They turn and look at you like that. They go, oh, wow. So those of you who know horses, I'm just going to throw this out there. When we put a horse in a round pen, you can't get 40 feet away from them, can you? You're well within that field. You're well within that space. So when you put yourself inside the horse's personal field, and then you start asking them, you're intensifying things, aren't you? It's amping it up. Anyway, if you respect the edge of this field, when you get to them, they start to respect you back. And that's a foundation for relationship, is respect. Okay. This is the other field that's more personal, which you're probably more aware of. That's about 4 feet out, 5 feet. This is a little bit further. About right there, halfway, is where their other personal body field is. And they walk with each other with those fields. So, when we walk with our friends, we have a space between us, right? They have one of those too. And that's where it is. It's more personal. I call that the more personal field. So who is HeartMath? And HeartMath is an organization. They've been around for about 30 years. And the short story is they have developed all kinds of research, published research, probably over 200 research studies published worldwide in journals, scientific journals, about the actual heart organ and its influence on our nervous system and our brain and our sympathetic and parasympathetic nervous systems. So what they've discovered is that the heart organ has the same function as the brain, in that the heart is transmitting a field around our body in all directions that we can feel, and that it perceives what's going on in the field seconds before your brain comes online to name it and say, oh, that's like this, or that's that, or that's, Your body has already been told. The heart organ itself also instructs your organs to respond to what it perceives in the field before your brain is online. So those old time sayings that we say, oh, it's all in the heart. Well, it is. It is all in the heart. Our heart is responding to what it feels in the field, these electromagnetic fields, long before our brains. So what we learned from HeartMath is, we went to them in 2005 or 6, I think it was, and asked them if they could do studies on horses, because I was sure that you could measure these fields. You could feel it with these horses. I could see it all the time. It was repeatable. And I wanted to know if we could get some science behind it to help people believe it more. So Roland McCready, head of their research department, said, oh yes, I had a horse growing up. I know exactly what you're talking about. I will absolutely do the study. And I said, okay, well, I'll pay for it. Let's do it. And we had another colleague friend, Dr. Ellen Gerke, who had 12 horses. She was the perfect one to practice with. So we learned from HeartMath what coherence looked like in horses. Now, coherence is when our thoughts and emotions that affect this heart electromagnetic field, it's going on whether we know it or not, but when they become in alignment, when our heart, this comes in alignment with our brain, which guess what? Guess when that happens? When we're present. It's like you start to see how these things line up. So when we become more present, we become more aware, we're more here, our physiological nervous system starts to align, meaning our sympathetic, our runaway, stressful, narrow your focus, goes down. Your parasympathetic becomes more dominant. Your brain waves change. Your brain waves change from more beta, which is what happens while I'm sitting here talking. That's a beta channel. Think of it as a radio station. Your brain waves shift more to alpha theta. And when that happens, we're in what HeartMath calls an optimal performance state. It's from this perspective that artists create art, where musicians get new songs, where we get intuition, all of the things that we do. We all do these things in and out of our lives. But what I'm saying is that we can learn to dial this in, and we can learn with the help of horses. I'm going to tell you how. So, oh, here's an example. I'm going to keep telling you some examples. So how does it show up? Well, I used to have the horses all out. Another thing Diora taught me was that horses hate to be in stalls. They all want to be out in pastures with friends and groups and doing their thing. And so I quit stalling horses, I don't know, back in the 80s. And never put them in stalls again, other than if they were ill or uh, needed, some special care of feeding. Anyway, I would go out to meet them, and they'd be out in the pasture. And oftentimes, when I would start to come out with intention to go be with them or to get one in, they would start running in. Now, it did help too. I will tell you that I did carry cookies in my pocket because it was a long walk, and oftentimes here it's raining, right? And I thought, okay, I'll pay them if they come in. I'll give them a little peek. So I was walking out to the pasture with my friend who happened to be a psychotherapist, and we were walking out, and I was sort of angry about something, and I was kvetching, going on about it, and probably doing this to her while we were walking. And the horses started to come in, and they got about from here to that back wall from me, and they skid to a stop, and the heads were up like, what? And then they spun around and took off. And she goes, oh, you are so busted. And I thought, yeah, look at that. They didn't even recognize me. And I thought, oh God, that's so. So that's how they mirror. You'll hear this. A horse will mirror what they feel in the field, right? So when you're out and they say, oh, a horse will know when you're afraid. Yeah. You know how they know? They're reading the field. So they feel fear in the field. And they don't bother taking the time to think, well, am I generating that fear? Or is it my neighbor over there that's suddenly aware of a mountain lion in the pasture with us? They don't take time for that. They just go, I feel fear. I'm going to respond to my fear, to the fear. It's not my fear. So it's interesting. They mirror what they feel. And so they didn't like that. I had to clean up my thing, and then everything worked out fine that day. So back to intention, inspired by the heart. And to understand that intention has energy and it influences this field. So here's another example of how that looks in a practical sense with horses. Years ago, having a workshop, had a bunch of people there, had a woman there who came and she said, "Oh, I run a big Arabian ranch in Florida, and I'm very, I know all about horses." I'm like, okay, that's good. And everybody good? We take a little intake. Oh yeah, I'm fine. Everything's good. And she didn't share much other than that. And we started getting going on our day with our horse-human interactions. And she decided that she was going to go after Diora. Diora was the horse for her. And she went after that horse with will, right? Willfully pursuing this horse. And Diora was like, okay, I'm going to go. And she just consistently left her every time she tried to come to her. So the day goes on. We finally get to this interaction called mindfully connecting, and she's trying to mindfully connect. Of course, she chose Diora. Diora was standing there, and as soon as she started to try to mindfully connect, Diora just left. Well, this really hurt her feelings. She took it personally, and she started to cry. And so we all timed out and said, "Oh, geez, how can we support you?" And she goes, "Well, I'd have to tell you, I have to come clean. I lied. Wasn't honest when I came. I'm a mess. My life is a mess. Everyone has left me. My husband has left me. My daughters have left me. I'm a wreck." And when she said that, guess who came basically trotting back and peeled the people away from, around her. And Diora brought her head up to this lady and stuck it literally on her chest, right here, her forehead on her chest, and stayed there with her while she cried. It was so moving. Makes me move today, many years later. So what happened? Why? Well, Because when we're not authentic, we're not trustworthy, right? So if you're a prey animal and somebody's around you who's not being authentic and congruent, meaning their behaviors are not matching what's going on inside, it's not all one thing, you're like, huh, that could be a wolf in sheep's clothing or something, right? It's not attractive. And so I will tell you, that lady was so moved by that experience that she signed up for our program and she finished it so that she could become an equine assisted learning professional. And every time she came back, it took her 3 years to get through the program. Every time she came back, that horse stuck by her side for the entire program. And I just was horribly jealous after that. I thought, why don't she just take her home, you know? All these years I've committed to her and she goes off with her. Anyway, I want to point out that an authentic, heartfelt presence in congruent action is what creates connectivity. And this is what horses identify as safe and worthy of leadership. And this is what they'll follow. So they're born knowing how to stand up, companion walk, and follow a leader. They find a leader and follow a leader. They're hardwired to do this. But how do they identify leadership? They don't identify leadership by who's the biggest bully, who's the strongest. It's not that at all. It's who's the most congruent, who's the most coherent, who's looking out for the whole. So think about that type of leadership. And isn't that what we're looking for now in the 21st century? The old power over models don't create bonds. They don't create teamwork. And this is something that horses model for us and demand from us. If you're willing to take the halter off and try to connect with them in that way. So they open this door to an invisible realm that creates a pathway to awareness and evokes connection, creativity, intuition, and healing. So I've pretty much covered this, that they understand the power of staying present and interconnected. What we learned in our study with HeartMath about horses is that they stay in a state of coherence pretty much all the time. And those of us who have horses and know that they can be spooky. You know, they go, oh God, there's a boogeyman. And they go out. And yes, they are dysregulated when they do that. But you know, they're quick to come back. They're very quick to come back to be regulated, go back to what we call grazing. And when they do that, their nervous system is calm and they're back into a state of coherence. Okay, so what could we learn from that? Because when we get upset, how long do we take to get back on the beam, right? We can take days. Somebody says something you don't like, it can go on for quite a while. And what we need to understand is that when you do that, any of us, our perceptions are narrowed. We're not dealing with our wider perception when we're in a state of dysregulation. So they don't go for power over, neither do we. Okay? So here I want to discuss these definition of terms. So equine relational behaviors, I'm talking about the behaviors that all equines are inherently born with. And that would be, they have a version of saying hello, then they have a process for jumping into a relationship. And we need to honor those when we meet horses. And we really pretty much, in the old traditional ways of working with these horses, we don't honor those. And so what I've found, and a lot of others, if you do honor those, the horses are more than willing to come and create a bond, a relationship and a bond. They want that. That's how they work. And you know what else? They quiet down. They become more calm and happy. So what are the heart fields? I think you get what the heart fields are. There are these electromagnetic fields around everybody's heart. So what is heart rate variability? Okay. So heart rate variability is the beat. So every time your heart beats, or any heart beats, it sends out a signal. And that signal has frequencies inside of it. And it's going to have low frequencies, mid-range, and high frequencies. And these are the beat, every beat is made up of this, it's like a band that has a bunch of instruments. Some beat the drums, some are mid-range, some are the flute, right? Your heart beats like that. So when your heart rate variability gets less, so you're having less variability in the heartbeat, that's a diminished state. And unfortunately, as we age, it does tend to diminish. But we can boost it. It doesn't have to stay diminished. It also will diminish when we're under stress, and it diminishes when we have PTSD or other maladies. Okay? If you can increase your heart rate variability, meaning you can have more low frequencies, mid-range, and high frequencies in your heartbeats, that's a healthier state. That's indicative of a healthier state. And when they smooth out and they get, not like jagged like this, like when I was kvetching going out to see the horses, it was probably this crazy line of, and you get a smooth signal being broadcast from your heart. That's what we call coherence. And when that coherence happens, again, your brain waves are online. So what happens when your brain waves come in sync with your heart rate variability, all that comes together, you're going to be having more alpha theta brain waves and less beta. Now, why does that matter? Well, first of all, horses pretty much don't have beta brainwave system. They don't, that comes with this fancy neocortex that we have. They don't have that. They pretty much hang in alpha theta where they can read the field, right? Here's another cool thing that I just got reminded of. I went to a heart math conference a couple weeks ago. They were saying that, that the Earth itself makes an electromagnetic field. You guys know this, right? You've heard this before. Well, guess what? When our heart goes into coherence, it's the same frequency as the Earth's electromagnetic field. So now my little brain's going, oh, maybe that's how channeling works, right? maybe they've dialed into some wavelength that we're all tuned into. So anyway, I'm still trying to figure it out. But so we literally become in sync with the Earth when we get into a state of coherence. So again, why does that matter? Okay, so in subsequent studies, after we found out that what coherence looked like in horses, we were then able to take that data and do studies on all the main interactions that people do with horses when they're in a therapy session or in an equine assisted learning session, right? And we measured the horses and the humans. This is something that we did. What we found is that across the board, when you hang out with a horse and you're present, they raise the very low frequencies of your heart rhythm in your heart signal. Now, why does that matter? Because that's healthier a lot. And if you have PTSD or if you are prone to heart disease, that's a big deal to get your very low frequencies boosted. So it helps you reconnect with how it feels to be in that healthier state by just being around the horse. You don't even have to do anything with them. Just mindfully be there, be present. So there's more. Also, being around them and interacting mindfully raises your heart rate variability. We see the variability go up, increase significantly. And that's healthy. And the other thing that was so cool that I loved is that across the board, whether people knew the horse or not, and in all of our studies, they didn't know. And these were peer-reviewed and published. You can find them on my website. When people send feelings of appreciation to a horse, guess what happens? Our heart frequencies start in training. Isn't that cool? You literally see that we share more heart frequencies. The human will get more low frequencies and then they start to blend. And we're seeing this just from sending appreciation to a horse. So imagine when we do it to each other, what happens in these, I'll call them social fields, that we're in. Okay? So here were some of the results that came from our study. That during mindful, and I'm going to emphasize mindful because we also studied people that came to the barn to ride their horse, and they weren't that mindful. They were there, getting the job done, exercise, Bubby, before I go home and make dinner. And nothing happened during those. We didn't see any of this improvement in the human's nervous system. Um, and we didn't see anything detrimental to the horse either, just so you know, in case you do that. It's not a big deal. But you're not getting the benefits. So, horses increase humans' heart rate variability. They significantly raise the very low frequencies in the human's heart rate variability spectrum. And they have increased the diastolic blood pressure of the elderly. So that's a study we did down in Tucson, Arizona. They went to a memory care facility there where people were living, and they brought people in on a program. They came repeatedly week after week. They measured the human and the horse at the same time. And what they saw was that a lot of these folks, when they're resting all the time and they're quiet and their health isn't that great, that the low number on their blood pressure, the diastolic, the low number, goes down. And I asked Anne, our head of our research, I said, well, why does that matter? And you guys probably, maybe you know this, but evidently that number shouldn't go too low, because that's like the pressure in the line when you're resting. You don't want it to be below a certain number. You want it to be healthy low. Well, guess what? The horses raised that number in these people when they were with them. I thought, wow, that's kind of interesting. And then they served as a regulator. So what does that look like? Well, they had folks there that were very, kind of dull, and, they were just sort of quiet and not really present. And as soon as the horse came around, they livened up. And then the horse would go to the next person who had trouble focusing. And guess what? They focused. So the horse was working as a regulator with each person that they went down the line with. Anyway, and then the horse's spectrums entrained with the humans. And across the board in all our studies, we saw increased self-esteem for people that work with horses in this mindful way. So I like this slide. This guy, he came to one of our programs. He's from, I'm not going to maybe say it right, Utria in Africa, that little tiny country. What, how do you say it? Eritrea, yeah. That's where he was from. And he came to our program. He was a nursing student. And he said, I've never touched an animal in my entire life. Never touched an animal. And of course, us animal people were going, what? How does that even happen, But in his world, he never touched an animal. And look at him with this horse. He ended up working with this guy and loving it, obviously. So, you mentioned in my introduction that Kaiser had been sending folks to these programs for years, and you might wonder why, why would they? Well, Kaiser, I don't know if you're probably familiar, but they're very, very in with HeartMath Institute, and they really do encourage all of their employees that are interested to get trained in the HeartMath systems, because they do understand if they can regulate their heart system, that they're going to be better performing, and they're going to be more connected to their patients, and they're going to be better team members. So there's that. We've also baked into it a caring science piece, but that's a little tangent. So it helps with understanding the elements that build trust in relationship. So what are those? I'm going to review. Presence leads to awareness. Intention influences the field. Our first job is to make a connection. And how do we do that? We've got to be present. We can't be on our phones. We can't be distracted. And it seems so simple, doesn't it? We all know this stuff. It's just, but when you do feel it, when you really get together and you feel it with these animals and you feel it with each other, it's so rewarding. And it's what makes us all feel better, because we are literally healthier because of it. So we're helping humans understand the strength and safety in working in cooperative alignment. I like that saying. So we're cooperating together in an alignment towards our goals. Okay. Any questions? Anyone want to know more about the science or the horses or the Yeah, we could do questions.
Okay, we're ready for questions.
Sure.
Lisa, you have 10 more minutes, if you have more.
I could talk all day long. Honestly, I could tell you more stories that would kind of blow your mind, but I don't know.
Okay, so I saw a hand over here.
I've got one good one I'm going to tell you. Remember your question. I want to tell this story for you guys. I had one day, I had my horse, I did get that horse that wanted to be a full-on dressage horse. He was a big Dutch horse, and he did go from beginning to Grand Prix, and it was really fun taking him there. He was a wonderful horse. He loved the work. He never wanted to not do it. And then when he got to be about 18 or 19, he developed a little arthritis in his foot. He wasn't limping or anything, but it was there, a little thing going on. And I got this expensive magnet that I put on his foot, a cuff, and he would wear that magnet, and it really helped. So he lived in that magnet, and he would go out in the pasture with that magnet. And one day, I went out to the pasture, and I walk out there, and there's no magnet. I thought, oh, dang, geez, it could be anywhere. It's like 5 acres of grass, and I'm going to have to be going like this for hours, looking for that magnet. And then it occurred to me, and I got past that emotional, ugh, and I thought, hold on. There is a unified field, and these horses live in this pasture day in and day out, year in and year out, and they sweep their nose literally across this pasture. They know where everything is in this pasture. Why would I don't need to find it. And I thought, God, wouldn't it be, Diora, I didn't even say anything. Well, I think I did. I said, Diora, where's the magnet? She was kind of like halfway out the room there. Where's the magnet, Diora? And I just kept my mind open. Why not, right? Why could this not happen? Did she tell me where that magnet is? And she lifted her head up from grazing, and that's a big deal for a horse, to give their head out of the feed bucket. And she came over to me, and she gave me an invitation, which I understand because I understand equine relational behaviors. And I said, okay, I'm with you. And she walked me over to about here and started grazing again right next to the magnet. And I thought, God darn, I'm amazed again. So, are we all connected? Does intention, influence the field? Yeah, I think it does. Okay, and you remember your question?
Okay, we got a question. Here's a question right here.
I came here to listen to you about horses,
Yeah.
but I have a dog. How do you think this translates?
Okay, this question always comes up, and this is a great question. It does translate. Your dog is part of the field. Absolutely. Anything that has a heartbeat is part of the field. And you guys, I've played with lizards and things like that in my barn. Like, could I just be here? And, yes, your dog is reading the field too. And the question often comes up, how are dogs different than horses? And here's the main one. When you go away and you come home, your dog goes crazy, loving, oh God, he's back. And they get all excited and they're like, a horse? Mm-mm. No, they might be glad to see you, but for a horse, you have to generate inside of yourself, you have to earn your leadership position every single time you come to be with that horse. They do not take for granted that just because you went to the grocery store and you came back, that you're still qualified to be their leader. You don't get it for free for horses. And that's what makes them good teachers for us. Because you have to go out every day and do it again. And they do this to each other. So once you keep your horses together in a pasture group, and you take one away, you go for a ride, and you put it back in the pasture, what do you think they do? They go right through the behaviors. It'll happen quick. Hello, glad you're back. Now I'm going to move you, or you're going to move me, or I'm going to do. They go through this little dance because they're reestablishing their relational behavior, their relationship, how they're going to relate to one another. And that's mostly, in my opinion, the number one difference. And size. Yeah.
Gotcha.
Okay.
I think you're probably aware, being you're putting Rumi in there. I think that's beautiful.
Yeah.
And there's a thing I've read about called entanglement. I don't know if you've heard it, but it's when planets can respond to each other.
Mm.
They vibrate with each other. Like there's one here and one here. They'll vibrate, and it's called entanglement.
Yeah. Wow.
Yeah. Uh-huh.
So,
And all,
yeah.
go ahead.
Well, so that might mean that these
heart,
fields
yeah.
are even bigger than we thought,
Yeah.
right?
Uh-huh. It's in space too.
Yeah.
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 And a little story is, first time I rode a horse, it was, which one do you want, the big one or the little one? And I picked the little one, and I got on it, and I was trotting along, and then all of a sudden that horse took off. It wanted to really get a run, and I was thrown off. My husband got on it, and he ran it. That horse just wanted to run. So he read me right away.
It could be. Yeah.
Lynn?
So I understand that horses are intuitive to people and with this heart field, and that they can help, like say, children with needs.
Mhm.
So I have a grandson that's ADHD.
Mhm.
Would that be off-putting to a horse with that high energy, or how would that calm?
Yeah, that's a good question. So if you were able to get your grandson to go to an equine assisted therapy, and often they are often in PATH, Professional Association for Therapeutic Horsemanship centers. Now, PATH centers are run, everybody that works there is a licensed therapist or a licensed physical therapist that knows how to work with horses. So he would be, or he could go, if he went with someone like me who wouldn't be looking, he could work with someone who's equine assisted learning educated as well. But what happens is that these kids that want to exercise their ability to focus, right? The horses help regulate that. But they have to be brought to the horses in a mindful way. No, it would not be good. I mean, if you took him out somewhere and they said, "Oh yeah, just go in there and get that horse," take your grandson and go home. Don't do that. That's not how they work. But if he's taught how to connect with them, and if he's given some tools, basic tools, heart math is all about the basic tools. It's a simple breathing technique, breathing in and out of our heart. You do that for 5 minutes. Guess what? You regulate. Slow your heart breathing down to 5.5 or 6 breaths per minute. Guess what? You're coherent. You're in a state of coherence. That's it's that simple. So yeah, he could absolutely benefit. And you know what they do? They have these kids, as you've heard of it, the children with autism and things. They're having a lot of luck with the horses, partly because the oxytocin that some of them don't create is actually generated through your hips and the movement of the hips. So you can imagine when they put these little kids on these horses and they're moving like this, that it activates that the body's ability to create oxytocin. And then of course they look at the horse who's not judging them. And then there's the very low frequencies being bumped up and the heart rate variability. You can imagine how it sets a nice stage. Yeah.
Yeah, I was, as you were,
Oh, okay.
as you were talking, I was thinking about the comment that horses were evolved from a prey animal, and they're about the only animal we relate with that is like that. I mean, dogs and cats are predators. How much do you think that affects, and are there studies of one versus the other or other prey animals? The only one I could think of is pigs, and they're not quite there. So I just wanted your comments on that.
That's a good point. Good question. Yeah, for some reason, horses have been with humans, and yes, they are prey animals. And some people argue that humans are predators. I personally think that we're kind of more prey than predator, but I think we can be predatory. And horses can be predatory too. If need be, they will take out. They'll eliminate something that's bothering them. They have that ability, but they don't live in that. That's not how they create relationship. So I don't know, what other studies. I don't think we have studied any other. Maybe elephants? What do you think? I don't know. Goats, yeah. Well, I just had lunch with a colleague who has sheep, goats, and horses in her therapy program. And she said the sheep are really tuned into this. Made me want to go play with them. I thought, that'd be fun. I've never hung out with sheep. I don't. Goat yoga, yeah, people do that. Got another question?
Yeah, I, okay, I'm sure you've heard of the Masterson's theory of,
Yes.
and again, back to horses being prey species. And apparently they have tension that they collect in their bodies from being prey, I guess. This is, and in this Masterson's technique, the horse has this meridian from his head all the way down through to his tail along the spine.
Mm-hmm.
And you move your hand. I mean, you know this, but I'm just saying it. I would like to have you explain to us what's the relationship between that Masterson theory, which I'll talk about a little bit, and the field theory that you're talking about. It seems like it's really connected, but I can't quite make the, what it is that you move your hand over the horse's spine and watch the horse very carefully, because when you hit a place where they have tension collected, they'll start doing what they call licking and chewing.
Oh, yeah. Right.
And then you know, okay, I got something there. And you just leave your hand over that space until they kind of drop their head or give you some sign that they've, and it can take an hour to do the whole level if you have that much time and your horse is patient.
Well, you're giving a perfect example of how horses respond to intentional healing energy inside of that field. And it reminds me of another story. Here's a story that's really fun. To the opposite sort of that, I had a workshop. Woman comes. She says, I'm a chiropractor. And I'm here because I want to start bringing horses and humans together in my practice. I want to work with horses too, adjust horses. And I thought, okay. But I'm afraid of them. I'm afraid of horses. So I thought, I should come and learn something about horses. And I thought, okay, we're good. So when we started working with the horses, who do you think she chose to work with in my little herd of horses? The most fearful horse I had. He wasn't like crazy or he wouldn't be in the program, but he had to work with fear himself. So she was attracted to him. She's working with him, and he's being very sweet with her, patient. And we were again doing that exercise that you just described, where you go and you just mindfully connect with the horse, right? You just come along. And this is one of the studies that we published, where we saw all these increases in, the coherence and HRV and all everything. She's going along. And then she'd get to a spot. She was very astute. She found a spot. Oh, I wish I had my activator. I could, and you're supposed to do this in silence, to help us like zip our mouth, right? So we can just be more present. Oh, if I had my activator, I could fix this. And she's talking about this metal popping instrument that she wants to bring to the horse. So guess what he does? He's like, I think I'll go backwards. And he would back up, and he'd stuck with her, sweet as he is. And she'd look at me like, what? And I said, well, activator? Maybe you don't want to talk about the activator. And so she changed, breathed a little, and he would come back. He came back. All right, I'm here. And then she'd go on down, and she got to the back part of his body, Same thing. Oh, there's another spot out right here. And guess what he did? It's not, I don't want you to think about that. He didn't perceive that. He didn't like that energy. He was completely mirroring when she was in and out of being present with him. So I finally pointed that out. I said, maybe just stay present, go on around. So she went around the whole horse, and she was able to do that. And she came back to the side that she started with. And when she was done, he had dropped his head and his ears were lopped. Their ears go, everything goes soft. And he was standing there, and he turned to, just to wrap his neck around her. It's kind of like a horsey hug that you see. And when he did that, his entire spine went and popped. Everything aligned. And she was blown away. And she turned around with tears and she goes, oh, wow. Oh, I guess everything I learned in chiropractic school isn't, and I said, no, of course not. Your tools are great. Now you got another one. You just add this to it. But that's a beautiful example that you shared about when you add that intentionality to the field of being present, it's more powerful. Got to be present with it. Does that help? Is that, yeah? No. Yeah. She's saying, what do I think is happening? Because you don't even touch the horse. Your hand is just over them, and you're feeling. Well, you're being present. You're perceiving where you feel differences in the energy field that's coming off their body. Of course, yeah, they are, and people too. Yeah.
So I have a friend up in Oregon who does this kind of work.
Mm-hmm.
And one of the things she talks about is the size of a horse's heart.
Yeah.
Could you say a little bit about that? Like how large their hearts are and the effect of that?
They're big. I think. Oh, where'd I go? There again. I'm not going to throw out some number. I imagine a bigger horse is going to have a bigger heart than a pony, right? And all that. But I see it in those fields that I showed you, where if you've got a big heart and it's putting out an electromagnetic signal, yeah, your field is going to be, I see it about 40 feet out, the first one. Then they have a real personal one. Like if we stand next to, if you stand too close to someone, if this is someone and I go, hi, at some point you're going, it doesn't feel good because I'm disrespecting your field environment. So horses have that too. They have one that's closer, but the first one's 40 feet out. This is an aside, but in our studies, we did on occasion hook up mini horses, and we actually didn't see these effects with mini horses. I don't know.
And
I don't know why.
this will be our final question of the morning.
Would this work with a Alzheimer patient?
Oh, I'm so glad you asked that. I have there's a bunch of colleagues here that in the Bay Area, I know now I'm blanking because I'm talking what they're called. Okay, I'm going to think of it at some point. Their whole thing was bringing people in memory care with their caretakers to the horses. And it's very simple, and they come out, and the way they've set up their thing is that the participants and their caretakers always come for free. And they've set this up at a number of PATH centers all over the Bay Area, and they've actually expanded now to other states. So yes, it's a beautiful thing to do together. Yeah.
Two quick things. One, her books are for sale in the back, and they're wonderful books. Secondly, if some of us wanted to take this training, I know you don't have you're not doing it here anymore. Would you do one for us?
Yes, I could. I am doing it here. I just, my personal story is I had the ranch in Sebastopol for 21 years, and in 19 we sold that ranch and moved to Carefree, Arizona, to another ranch where we thought, but we got lonely there. It was so beautiful, but it was literally lonely. I mean, there was wildlife everywhere, but half the community in Carefree leaves for the unpleasant times. That's half the year. And so and we realized, you know what? We like California. I'm like a third generation Californian. So we moved back, and we just got settled. So we've just been back a few months. And so I am still doing programs here, but I'm working on out of a place down in Nicasio, down there. And I'd love to find another location more north to work. So, yes.
So if you're interested in doing that training, doesn't it sound wonderful? We'll have a sign-up sheet in the back.
Okay.
Thank you, Judy. And
Is that
thank you,
okay with
Lisa,
Yeah.
for your wonderful presentation.
Thank
Thanks
you
for
guys
coming
for
out.
the great, thank you for everything.
Next week, we have Wen Chang, and she will be addressing North Korea and China. We hope to see you then. Have a great week.